And if there's one thing that community managers or gyms can always like anchor into with their number one goal, it should be how can I constantly find create space for my members to feel better. That's the one thing. How can we make you feel better? And if you leave our session feeling better, we did our job. And by making them feel better, the key to human psychology around this whole technique is that that's the only thing they go home with.
Hello and welcome to the Anti-Gravity Man Flycast. I'm Christopher Harrison and I am here today with the one and only Tamer Begum. We are very excited to have you as my guest on the Flycast today, Tamer. Before you start, I'll give you a little bit of introduction as to who Tamer is. Tamer is not only a master instructor with anti-gravity, knowing all of the programs and having taught them all over the world, he's also been the gold licensee for Anti-Gravity Hong Kong. He was a lab manager at the Anti-Gravity Lab in New York City and helped us start the lab there. He helped to start anti-gravity in the Philippines and also in Thailand, and also he's worked with them in Taiwan and of course Hong Kong. Did I miss any places? Well, in Japan, of course, has taught all over Japan. So Tamer is basically the guy that took anti-gravity to Asia. So welcome, Tamer. We have many questions for you today, and I'm really glad to have you on board.
Thank you, Christopher. It's an honor to be here with you today.
All right. We can't bury the lead. The other part that's really great about having Tamer here is that Tamer is actually the first guinea pig for the anti-gravity hammock because he is my nephew. And long before we started Anti-Gravity Fitness, I put one in his home and let them play and let them come up with things. And he and his cousins and you guys came up with a whole lot of the stuff that we then figured out was going to be part of the curriculum. So maybe we start with that. Can you tell us, can you tell our listeners what it was like to have an anti-gravity hammock in your home when you were a kid?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was such a unique experience to have in our living room where one Christmas, Uncle Chris came home and put up these two silky hammocks in my mom's house in Salt Lake City, Utah, where we were living. And we had no idea what to do with it at the time, but we knew it was really fun to swing in. And then he showed us a few tricks and how you can do backflips on it and hang upside down. And a lot of movement just started to naturally unfold as we would put I'd put all my sisters in them and we'd spin each other around, and then all the friends would come over and we'd all figure out ways to climb them and swing in them and all the tricks that you could do. And we were fearless, as teenagers at that time. I think we were 16, and under. Movement modality just started to naturally emerge as we were creative in what we could do with these things. So I think that was my first introduction to the Harrison anti-gravity hammock was in Mom's living room after Uncle Chris coming home one year for Christmas.
I remember coming over one time, and I think you said that you put 10 people in the hammock all at once.
Yeah, we would test the boundaries of how many we could actually fit into them. And for those who know about the Harrison hammock, you can stretch it out like really wide. So we'd pull it as wide as we could and then just climb in. I think all three of my sisters and their friends and my friends would all climb on top. And thank God for the sturdy rigging and the safety of the equipment because, yeah, I think 10 of us all climbed in at once.
Well, I think it's why whenever people are like, are you sure this will hold me? I just kind of laugh and roll my eyes because I'm like, I've seen it hold 10 people at once before. It was kind of like when I was a kid and you used to see how many people you could pack into your Volkswagen Bug,
Yeah.
I'm really dating myself there, but I remember you doing that with that.
It's true. We'd climb in, and I mean, we also had the coolest house because kids and our friends would just want to come over just to swing and play in these hammocks because nobody had ever seen them before. So we were like the first, and we didn't really know what we were doing at the time. We had no idea what these things were at the time. Again, this was nearly 20 years ago. So at the time, it was just like, yeah, Uncle Chris does this stuff in his shows all over the world. And, you see him in the Broadway stages and you see them in the Olympic ceremonies, and now they're in our living room. But then after, I think it was 2007, 2000, around that time after he launched the technique in Salt Lake City at Darlene's studio at the time, He had
Yeah.
a giant binder, like a 3-ring binder with about, it was however many programs he jammed into one course. And we had this binder next to the hammocks. And we would just like look at the pictures and then try and figure out how to do them. This is kind of our first introduction to the technique.
Well, and then later on, when you came and lived with me in New York for a while, you wound up having that binder and literally helping us create the Anti-Gravity Digital Academy. So if you see the Anti-Gravity Digital Academy, you will see Tamer as one of the models on there, and many of the cues actually were cues that we kind of came up with together. So, I always say that although I invented it, is very much of a collaborative process, and Tamer was a very very big part of that collaboration. That's taking it back.
The original guinea pigs will own it.
So then, as we were building the programs, I remember very clearly because you came in right after college. And you helped us build the anti-gravity lab. You and Mike did, and putting the hooks in the ceiling and figuring everything out. And then we were also started to create the courses. And as we were creating each one of the courses and also shooting the Anti-Gravity Digital Academy, there was a whole lot of stuff that had to be fine-tuned so that it would wind up, making sense, so that when you're teaching it to other people, that it would, outside of the country, that it would be able to translate. And Tamer was also the very first person to take it to a university. And while you were in college, you launched it at Westminster. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was really exciting. And I remember, if we rewind just right before that, I was in New York City that summer, as I would pretty much do throughout a lot of my childhood and teenage years. And I remember training with Uncle Chris in Midtown at what was then the studio right above the lab. And I was working with all the other great master instructors at that time. And I was just fully immersed. And I think one of the keys of learning any new technique, whatever it may be, if it requires physical kinetics and, uh, adapting your body to something new, the first suggestion I found, what really worked for me, was total immersion. I was in the studio every single day, and multiple studios around New York City, studying with great teachers, assisting their teacher trainings, and then practicing it in my body, so that by the time I got back to university, which was then my third year, I was like really ready to go. And so it was a super exciting time where I was working in the wellness center, and I presented basically the director of the wellness program with this opportunity to be the university in kind of that has ever had this technique, with the opportunity to basically install the hammocks and to offer it to the community. And she was fired up about it, which was so cool, because she basically had this dance studio underneath one of the buildings that wasn't fully utilized. And lucky enough, across the whole dance studio was this giant like I-beam. So I just literally drilled holes, put I-beam clamps on it, and hung the hammocks from these these eye hooks that screwed into the I-beam. There's a bit of an interesting rig, but nonetheless, we were the first campus in the world with this technique. And so it was really exciting time to be at Westminster and to be kind of the first studio at a university in the world. And the special thing about that was I had a really great relationship with the athletic kind of ski and sports, basically the coach for the ski and snowboarding team. I developed a great relationship with him and proposed that they would cross train in the studio with us. And he was fired up about it. And not only was it a great opportunity for me to add more classes to what I was doing in terms of building a community of people who like this technique, but it also gave all these athletes an opportunity to decompress. It was like the coolest thing we were doing, where they would swing, they would stretch, they would hang upside down, and then we would do like sports psychology meditations in the hammocks. And it took off. Like every single winter sports athlete at campus during those couple of years when I had it, it's like my last couple of years there, they were in the studio 2 or 3 times a week, which is like just such a great opportunity to work with these types of athletes, who many of them went on to the Olympics. And a handful of Winter Olympians from Westminster College actually took, gold and silver medals at Sochi, which was the Winter Olympics that happened just shortly after that. So it was cool.
I remember that. I remember thinking that these guys who had this incredible kinesthetic intelligence of being able to move, like fly up through the air, and especially on skis, and then knowing exactly how to land, the amount of kinesthetic intelligence they had to have, and then the impact they would have on their body, especially the ones that were doing moguls and such, the impact that would have on their spine. And I remember you telling me how much they really, really liked the decompression aspect, but they also enjoyed the three-dimensional
Yeah.
work that you given them.
Certainly, like 15 minutes, because the coach was really, really smart. He knew the benefits of proprioception training and swinging and spinning for brain development. And 15 minutes out of every class, these guys would swing from ceiling to ceiling, spinning themselves around and literally just swinging and spinning as if they were like going off a huge jump and doing some, 1080 corkscrew and top of a mountain. It was so fun because we would just play fun music, we would swing, we would spin, and then at the end, they would just all of them would just fall asleep in cocoon. And I knew that what we were planting the seeds for then was something that would not only lead to more universities around the country and around the world adopting this program, but it would be the pioneer of how athletes would cross train with the hammocks. So it was like a really awesome little, breeding ground for this technique and with that specific audience.
Yeah, that was it was really great. And then I remember there was you even did some research on it, right?
During my first 2 years, I was going for pre-med, and I found out that I didn't want to be a dentist and take after Grandpa Harrison, and I knew that going to doctor school, I would just be miserable. So I remember like getting out of biology class one day, just so over this, like falling asleep. I made going to school miserable, and I always loved education and I always loved learning, but those courses were just like so difficult for me, and I just really didn't enjoy being at school and in those classes. And it was by the grace of divine intervention that the following year could not only go travel and study abroad in Thailand, but I could also basically apply this all the learning that I was doing in the anti-gravity studio there towards my degree. So it was perfect where I was then for my senior thesis did a cohort study on people and athletes with back pain. So I got a bunch of students, half all of them had different degrees of a chronic and acute back pain. And the first half they were doing like I would do mat-based yoga stretches on the ground with them. And then the other half they would just do decompression. And I found that there was like a 75 to 85% reduction in pain after they would do the like questionnaire. Of the group that was doing the anti-gravity sessions were all reporting that their acute back pain was going away. And so it was just really cool to see like mat yoga in comparison to anti-gravity and with this similar type of audience, how the decompression was like such a huge indicator of reducing this type of inflammation and other discomfort in the spine. It was, unfortunately, we never published a study or like took it to like a massive scale of getting it really like approved by governing bodies, but it was definitely an amazing, eye-opening study for me, and my teacher loved it because it was such a simple, practical way to show two groups and something that has never been done before for a senior thesis to be, shared with the other public health graduates. So I got a lot of good accolades and got some interesting data from it. I think there's a lot more to the science and the data and what we could do with this technique from a scientific perspective if we were ever to go that route. I think we established that we planted a few seeds.
So, you started talking about the kinesthetic intelligence that all the different athletes had that came in, and how because they were skiers and because they're used to getting big air, they were able to come in and do the technique pretty quickly and easily and then adapt to it quickly. But I want to say the same thing about you. And part of it was having a hammock in your home, but part of it was that your Uncle Chris was always pushing you to challenge your kinesthetic intelligence in every way possible, whether it's a rolling globe or whether it's rollerblades. And then you wound up taking that to so many heights and so many levels. So can you talk a little bit about what it is to train kinesthetic intelligence and the importance that you think that has for kids today and for people who come and take class?
Yeah, I mean, well, first off, thank you, Uncle Chris, for always providing us with a variety of ways to move and train our kinetic intelligence because ever since I was a kid, you've always had the coolest toys and tricks and tools, and the support for the gymnastics lessons, to the sending us big giant walking globes for our birthdays, to the trampolines in the backyard. I mean, you name it, you've been an incredible movement mentor and somebody who has always inspired us to stay active and push the boundaries of what is physically possible, getting us into snowboarding lessons, reminding us to go and, exercise our bodies. And then as the hammocks came about, that was just the natural kind of progression of like the ultimate kinetic tool. I still, remember the days of running down Ninth Avenue with jumping boots on that were ripping my shins off, and the segways through New York City as teenagers selling Segway rides on the first Segways that were ever in Manhattan, to the bungees at Exit nightclub,
Yeah.
to the even just down here in Orlando where I'm based, working with Daniel and Heather and seeing their tramp walls and their giant studios for aerial silks where we can go in and play. I mean,
And
the
then the last time you were in New York, you got onto my electric unicycle, and what took me hours to learn, you learned in like 10 minutes. I was like, "What? Those aren't that easy. They're a big learning curve." But I think that you had so much diversity in training your kinesthetic intelligence that you can pick up anything pretty quickly. And I wanted to talk about that in terms of your son right now, because I get to see you as a father passing that same thing on to Leo. And it's so exciting. He's almost 2, right? He's
yeah,
almost 2, but
in a couple weeks.
he is constantly moving. He was just here in New York, and I got to watch you picking him up and lifting him over your head, and I got to watch you, you know, training him to try every little thing that he possibly could. And it's been fun to watch that kind of get passed down. Can you talk a little bit towards that?
Well, I mean, it's just the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. With what you learned as a young kid, even you don't remember it, it just you naturally gravitate towards wanting to share that with your kids. And so in this case, and now having a lot of knowledge around what is beneficial for developing brains at this stage in life, I mean, nothing could be better than giving them swinging and climbing and jumping and flipping and swimming and, a variety of different things that proactively engage the brain to expand its neuroplasticity into, a vibrant, rich, child that can move and has a plethora of different ways to adapt, which I think is the key thing, adapt to any environment. So to be able to take him to the playground and he's 2 and he climbs up this giant rope all by himself, right? It's all by myself. Dad, don't help me. While the 4-year-olds are afraid to climb up the rope, it's amazing to see. And, I remember when he was born in New York and we were living just across the bridge in Fort Lee, from day one, when we were at home, he was swinging in hammocks. He would sleep in there. So it's been
Even
just,
when he was in utero, I remember when Angela was pregnant with him in utero, we put him in the hammock.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So to be able to pass down these types of kinetic tools to him, I think the most exciting part is just to see how much further he is ahead of other kids that don't have the same kinetic tools, but also how much fun he has with these things. Like he loves to swing and go higher. And he wants to spin in the hammock as high as it can spin. And he wants to jump on the bed every morning now, waking up daddy, jumping on the bed. No more monkeys jumping on the bed, but this one wants to jump in the morning. So, and then in the pool, he's not even 2, but he can swim, the length of almost 10 yards across the pool.
Oh.
At the playground, he's climbing up ropes and, doing all this, like, really, like, wow. I don't know, because he's our firstborn son, but to us, it seems like he's quite physically advanced in comparison to others kids that we see at the playground who don't necessarily have the same kinetic training.
Well, you taught anti-gravity just kids program in Hong Kong for a while, right?
Yeah. Yeah. 4 years.
For 4 years, right? So you had all kinds of kids from all levels there that you were training at kinesthetic intelligence.
Yeah, so if we jumping back to the kids program and the teaching of it, there's so much to be said around giving children the ability to swing and play and discover the Harrison hammock. And we had a unique environment where they were doing gymnastics and martial arts and BJJ and then gravity. These kids were already quite advanced in terms of their movements. But the thing about the hammock, which was different, is that it gave them three-dimensional movement, and it was also the most fun. So I immediately became the coolest coach. Like Coach Tamer is still a legend in some circles in Taiwan and in Hong Kong because it was the most fun class. And the parents also saw huge value in it because it was the only class that had a mind body connection for kids under the age of 10. Even just a few weeks after they would start taking classes with us, their teachers would tell their parents, like, your kid's behavior is improving and he's now able to focus better. And I think that was a really cool part of it. Beyond like them getting stronger and learning to do all these fun tricks, which is really what it just turned into, like an aerial playground. But it was the how it was affecting them outside of the classroom, with being able to focus more, how their relationships at home were better, how they were, in Hong Kong, how they were treating their helpers nicer, and how they were getting along with kids easier at school. And I think a lot of that was due to the cocooning effect and the mind body connection that is interwoven into the kids program.
Well, and the Anti-Gravity Just Kids program is very thorough. Darlene and I worked on that together and created it so that it has, there's the earth, there's the water, there's the fire, there's all the different configurations and things you can learn. So that it's a really strong curriculum. And how did that serve you in teaching?
Well, frankly, the kids evolve so fast beyond the curriculum that you have to be a highly advanced teacher to be able to give that thing roots and to progress it for years. Because,
Yeah.
within after 12 weeks, they've done every trick and they want more tricks. So I encourage anybody who wants to implement a Just Kids program into their center to also have the DNA of anti-gravity, of suspended fitness and aerial yoga, because kids evolve on this thing rapidly, way faster than adults. So, within 12 weeks, they're already wanting to do, they've already burned through both of those books. You want more. And so the playtime, which is so important of that curriculum, like the free time element, turns into their most sought after section. Now they can just discover and play, and you can show them a little bit here, show them a little bit there, and then they'll take it and run with it. So that's my one advice for anybody who wants to implement Just Kids is make sure that you have enough curriculum to give it the wings that it will naturally fly to, and that you feel comfortable to manage the aerial playground as it gets very hectic. 18 children in hammocks swinging, asking for more.
Wow. Wow. So
That's crazy.
you've taught so many that you've taught all of our programs really, and in studios all over the world. And I would you helped us to establish the anti-gravity lab in New York City. So if you were to talk a little bit towards a studio owner and as someone who's going to be opening a studio, and what do they need to do to make it successful, and what are some of the tips that you've seen? What are some of the ways in which you can give some advice to some of our studio owners out there?
Yeah, well, first of all, if you're in the fitness, the yoga, or the social wellness space, you cannot have a better technique to install into your facility. There is nothing on in the market that allows people the type of immediate physical gratification that tipping upside down in a hammock or just coming into floated cocoon does. I mean, there's a lot of great fitness programs, and being in group fitness for over 15 years, we've seen it all. And we've been at the big conferences from FIBO in Shanghai to Germany. We've seen them in IRSA in LA and Vegas. We've seen every single pretty much major new technology come, and it's constantly evolving, which is great. And that said, there's nothing out there that allows people the ease of zero compression for back care, and for the giving the body and the brain its parasympathetic state of just laying and floating with ease.
I've seen you build communities out of with this program in the Philippines. I remember you had a very strong community there with Beyond
Yeah.
Yoga, and certainly, you know, our community in Taiwan. And I remember Thailand when we first started up there, and Japan. We have a beautiful community in Japan, and Hong Kong. So, can you talk a little bit about that and about what the how the community aspect works? Because we know that what we're intending to do here is do more than just deliver fitness and exercise, but create ways for humanity to actually interact with one another and for us to start actually connecting with other human beings again.
Well, the community is everything. It's more important than any program you have in your studio. It's more important than any new product you're going to release. It's more important than anything above and beyond is that you are investing in your community. Gyms and studios and owners who remember that, who constantly find ways to add value to their community or clients, whatever you want to call them, the community, the clients, the people who are coming regularly to support the business are the ones that are still open and the ones that thrive in this industry. So, to talk about it internationally, it's been very eye-opening because what we do in Hong Kong at the time was very different to what they were doing in Japan. To give you an example, the Hong Kong community is a very, very small. Hong Kong's a tiny island with 7.5 million people. So if you're doing something really cool in Hong Kong, the chances of people knowing about it really quickly are basically overnight. You'll catch fire and be viral. So Hong Kong, we blew up from one location to 20 locations in just, I think it was like 3.5, 4 years, because what we were doing was just so prolific. Nobody was doing aerial yoga with that many coaches. And then these types of locations where it was, with First Body Wise, which was spa with hammocks. And then it was Epic, which was the MMA fighters with the hammocks. And
Yeah.
then it was how we expanded the teacher training model to all these different locations that wanted to train their staff. So overnight, and from the most local areas of Kowloon to the most prestigious areas of Causeway Bay and the heart of Times Square with 5 elements, we were on fire. And Hong Kong knew what area, and still does to this day, have a very, very strong community of people who practice anti-gravity and aerial yoga because of how enjoyable and easy it is for them to feel better. And if there's one thing that community managers or gyms can always anchor into with their number one goal, it should be, how can I constantly find and create space for my members to feel better? That's the one thing. How can we make you feel better today? And if you leave our session feeling better, we did our job. And by making them feel better, the key to human psychology around this whole technique is that that's the only thing they go home with, which is what I found so successful in Taiwan, which was the escape from the kids, the moms, the husbands, the grandmas, the mother-in-law, the grandparents. It's a 1 hour escape for them to go do some exercise. Whereas, that's everything. And then if you switch gears to what it was like in Japan, they have dialed in the community so well because of just their culture that every one of those studios at that time was they were crushing it, because they would walk in with a welcome tea, and then they would all sit down and look at their little things or their little apps or whatever. They would just talk in the lounge area. And then they would all wipe their feet with a warm towel before entering the studio. And then in the studio, all the hammocks are pristinely clean and the floors are heated. And it's like the whistles and the bells and the sound. It's like you enter into a vortex of a new world that you can never find anywhere else. And then after the class, and a lot of them in Japan, they want it hard, they want workout, or they want to really just relax and relieve the stress. They all sit and have a little biscuit after class, talk a little bit more, and then they go off into their world. So it's like the community aspect of this technique is so different based on the country that you're in the culture where it's being offered. But at the same time, it comes back to the same essence of people are coming to this technique to feel a little better. And if community managers and studio owners can anchor into how can we make you feel better today, you will see your business.
Having taught this all over the world, do you find that there's a big difference between teaching people in America versus teaching people in Asia?
Yeah, 100%. And the big thing about that is, I would say there are probably two or three main differences. The first one is in Asia, there's this like the Asian moms and the women, they seem to be a little more open to alternative ways of wellness. Call it Chinese medicine, call it ancient Japanese culture around how they just preserve, call it even in Taiwan, really believe that, health and doing it in a non-pharmaceutical, non-doctor, like preventative way is actually the way to longevity. And
Yeah.
there's also a social collective, like collectively, when I take care of myself, I mean, you look at the lab right now, probably 60% of the people who are coming there, they're the Chinese, they're the Korean, that's the place, right? You have such a huge pull from people who are Asian to this technique. And I think and again, it's a cultural thing, but it's also a body type thing. And then thirdly, we in America, we grow up with so much fear. We are constantly being exposed to fear. Go watch a football game, and it's commercials and fear. And if it's not fear about commercials, it's fast food or it's pharmaceutical drugs. Buy the next drug, take the next drug, here's the next drug. You don't see any of that. There's no commercials feeding you pharmaceutical drugs, right? So you take the society that we live in here, which is heavily fear based and heavily pharmaceutical based, and a culture that's really based around driving, right? 80% of Americans, they don't walk, they just drive. So you add all that together, and it's no wonder that the only places that we've seen real success from like a business development perspective here in the States are the large gyms, the large big box gyms that add anti-gravity to their systems for another added value to their members, but not as a standalone product. Whereas in Asia, the boutique fitness gyms are all about this as the standalone product with other ways of keeping members engaged.
I know. I just I found that teaching here in America, there's so much more fear you have to manage. People have all this panicky stuff going on
Yeah.
about turning upside down. And I've never understood it. I've just been like, what is it that makes us so much more fearful? We come from a free country. You would think that we wouldn't be that way. But I do think it is that marketing. I think it's that we're constantly fed fear with everything. So you're left to doubt, you're left to wonder, you're left to go, I could kill myself. You're left to be. I think what happens is people get caught up in the negative prediction on the 1 in a million chance of something happening.
Mm.
And that 1 in a million chance is the negative prediction that gets stuck in their head, and they think, oh, I could never do that. But the truth is, I always say, I can turn any body upside down, but not every mind. And it does require then that as an instructor, you have to know how to coerce people in order to feel comfortable enough to be able to get them there. And I know you're very much a master at that. I watched you. So listen, I think we're running out of time, but I've had such an incredible chance as time speaking with you. I wanted to finish with one last thing, and that is that, last time you were here and Leo got in the hammock, you two were ridiculous. I mean, he was swinging from the ceiling to the ceiling. He was spinning like a tornado for, I don't know, half an hour straight. And he just kept laughing and kept loving it. And it was so fun to see you doing it suddenly with your own son and seeing that being passed down there. And for me to see it as a great uncle was really, really special. So little Leo has a legacy, that's for sure.
Well, it's something that we will always utilize everywhere we live. We'll always have hammocks wherever we live. We'll always find ways to incorporate this into our lifestyle, especially both for the benefits from the kinesthetic perspective, but also to give him a way to like quiet down and take a nap. And as he continues to get older, finding ways to go inside and, go inward, which is perhaps one of the most, non uh it's it's not widely seen as for kids as a way to go inward. So the word I'm looking for is the indirect benefit for like as he continues to grow, this is your safe space where you can go look inward and connect with who you are inside. And if there's probably the most beneficial thing or the one thing that I want people to take away from this story that we've been sharing and just my experiences with this technique, it's that the only thing you use the hammock for is to remember who you are inside and constantly bring attention back to that inner power and that inner voice and those inner dreams. And all it takes for you sometimes is to like climb inside a cocoon and close your eyes and go back into that place. Then it's perhaps the most valuable thing that you could ever do with this technique, which is to remember who you are inside before all the titles and all the labels, and that I amness that can grow from closing your eyes, relaxing your body, and being enveloped in cocoon. So whether that's for Leo or for myself or for anybody who's listening to this, remember who you are before everything else and allow the hammock to be a vessel for you to remember that beautiful state.
Thank you. You stated that beautifully. Well, we're here to uplift humanity literally and figuratively, and to inspire people to be lighter in body and mind. And you certainly do that really well. You live out the legacy beautifully. So, and watching you teaching little Leo at 1.5 years old how to quiet and breathe and get still, and watching him at 1.5 being able to get still in the hammock, I'm like, wow, who teaches that? So thank you. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on my podcast on the Anti-Gravity Man Flycast. And I guess the way we finish it is with a big fly high. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Fly high. Thank you, Tamer.
Thank you.